Welcome to the Nourish Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey everyone, before we get started with this episode, I wanted to let you know I'm offering a brand new workshop called The Wait is Over: How to Promote and Protect Your Child's Health at Any Size. This is a live workshop offered on January 26th from noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's designed for parents and caretakers, professionals, and really anyone interested in the health and well-being of children. Again, that's called The Wait is Over: How to Promote and Protect Your Child's Health at Any Size. For all the details about the Wait is Over workshop, head over to thenourishchild.com. I hope to see you there. Health is more than the absence of disease. It's the presence of harmony within you and with everything around you. Words by my friend and Ayurvedic specialist guru, Dr. Avanti Kumar Singh, who is my guest today on the Nourish Child podcast. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jill Castle, your host. This podcast is just one of the ways I help parents like you learn about child nutrition, feeding kids and nourishing them inside and out. So before you settle in and get cozy, I want you to do something really quick. And this is what it is. Wherever you are, podcast app or YouTube, I want you to pause, rate, and review the show, or hit the subscribe button on YouTube. That's it. Let's help another parent find this information and feel more informed and empowered about nourishing their child. Now, the best part of the show is my guest. Dr. Avanti Kumar Singh is a 20-plus year physician who began her career as an ER doctor in Chicago. She quickly recognized the limitations of Western medicine and believed her patients deserved more. This realization took her from Brazil to study energy healing, back to India to become a practitioner of its 5,000-year-old ancient healing tradition known as Ayurveda. Combining the findings of modern science with the principles of traditional healing, Dr. Avanti is a thought leader in Ayurveda and an expert in integrative wellness. Her courses, writings, lectures beautifully bridge the gap between the technological advances of Western medicine and the traditional, equally effective practices of Eastern medicine. She's a portal to demystifying and understanding the power and beauty of Ayurveda. She holds a BA in art history from the University of Chicago and a medical doctorate, MD, from Rush University College of Medicine. She's also a certified plant-based professional and certified yoga therapist, and she hosts the Healing Catalyst podcast and her first book, The Health Catalyst: How to Harness the Power of Ayurveda and Achieve Optimal Wellness, published in 2020. I have the book right here. Avanti, welcome to the Nourish Child. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Jill. I'm so honored to be on your podcast because we've known each other for a few years. And I remember when I was just starting out on this journey of writing and doing, speaking, and you were such a mentor to me. So it's such an honor to be on your podcast. So thank you for having me.
Well, it's been so fun to watch your journey because I think it's absolutely fascinating. And I remember sitting in a restaurant, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and I think you called me Fire. I was fiery.
I did.
And was super intriguing. So one of the things I'm hoping that we can do today is really just introduce the concept of Ayurveda to parents, because my audience is typically parents and some professionals. But just to introduce what is it? What is the history, and how can families maybe implement some of the principles of this Eastern medicine into their current sort of traditional Western medicine model? But before we dive into those questions, I would love for you to sort of tell people how you started your transformation and how that led to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be so happy to. I have a story that I think is very similar to a lot of people who are in the health professions. They have their own health crisis and they start looking for answers for themselves. And that leads them on a journey to wherever it leads them to. And for me, this happened during my medical training. I was in my residency training and I started to have a lot of health issues. Small symptoms that just because I ignored them, started to build up and become more and more of a problem. Headaches, the weight gain, the pain in both my feet, plantar fasciitis, because I was in the ER training in emergency medicine, constipation, just all of these things that just started to happen, anxiety, even some depression at times. And I was looking for answers and I just kept getting told the same thing by my colleagues, which is you are under a lot of stress. You're in medical training. You have 2 small children. You have a lot of roles and responsibilities. That's really what's going on. And it just didn't feel like that was really what was only the thing going on. Yes, all of those things were true, but there was more to it. And what really happened for me is I went back to the medicine that I grew up with. I grew up with Ayurveda. I'm South Asian, first generation here in the United States. My parents immigrated from India. And Ayurveda was just how we lived our lives. That's what we did on a daily basis. And I think I was starting to reflect on the fact that for the first 20 something years of my life, I never had any medical issues. It wasn't until I got to my training that all of these things started to happen. And I sort of thought, why is that? What's really going on here? And I realized that it was my lifestyle. It was everything about my life that was causing these issues. And so I went back to looking at Ayurveda and looking at the way we lived when I was a kid. And I found so much wisdom there and it just made a lot of sense to me. So that was the beginning of my journey back to what I had grown up with.
Yeah. Yeah. What strikes me is some of the sort of symptoms that you were experiencing. People learn to live with those, like accept the fact that they have headaches or accept the fact that they're constipated. Like that's just who they are. And interestingly, you recognize that as something that doesn't have to be the norm.
Yeah, I think partially for me is that I was blessed with the fact that I didn't have those issues earlier in my life. So it was such a change from what I had experienced. So I had something to compare against. I know a lot of people don't have that necessarily, but for me, I really could see that. And I was like, what is happening? It can't just be that because I've chosen the career path I've chosen that I'm going to have to live with these issues for the rest of my life. It's sort of, this paradox of, being in a profession where I'm trying to help other people get healthy, but I'm getting sicker by the minute. That paradox, that irony has always stuck with me. It really struck me and I was like, this can't be. And so, yes, I think I was really, really lucky that I had something to compare against. So I could say to myself, no, I can't live like this. I don't want to live with all these symptoms. And, I think the other thing that really happened for me is I kept throwing out my back. I kept having back spasms and it would just level me for a few days where, I'd have a few days off because I was working shifts in the ER and I would spend most of my time in bed trying to manage my pain. And again, it sort of was like, at what point is this not okay? And I was in my 30s at the time with 2 young children. So there were so many reasons that I was like, I can't live like this. And so that's really why I decided I had to look for answers.
And you left the ER.
I did. Eventually I did. I left Western medicine, not right away, but I did because I think what I realized is that there's so much power in this medicine and that I was becoming more disenchanted with the medicine I was practicing. Not because I don't believe in Western medicine. I absolutely do. But I also think it's not the whole story. I think there's so much wisdom and knowledge and power in these other healing traditions that have been around for thousands of years. that it's really important that we take these lessons from this Eastern healing tradition and start to integrate it and blend it with what we know in Western medicine. I think the other thing for me is that it was easier to walk away, to leave. Not that it was easy. It was difficult, but I could get there intellectually because what I was seeing is that everything that is a basic principle of Ayurveda has been proven by Western medical science. From my perspective, the studies I was seeing, the things I had learned, it all lines up. So that made it easier for me to make that transition.
So let's backpedal a little bit, because I'm curious about some of the gaps that you were seeing in Western medicine. Can you think of or give us an example of some of the sort of missing pieces to the puzzle, perhaps, that were really clear to you?
Yeah. I think that the biggest piece was that I felt that Western medicine was all about symptom management all the time, right? Yes, that's important. When you're in pain, when you're in discomfort, you absolutely want to relieve that pain and that suffering. Absolutely. But that can't be the only answer, right? It can't be that, every few weeks I'm seeing the same people in the emergency room with the same problems, because nothing has changed. No one has guided them to change anything beyond taking their medication or doing certain things. It's like, what can we do to help this person prevent coming into the ER in the first place, right? How can they start to manage their symptoms down to a place where they can actually live a really full life, even if they have those symptoms, but they can manage them on their own so that they're not dependent on medications and interventions and, coming to a hospital or to an emergency room, right? How can they manage that on their on a daily basis? And so I think the missing piece was the prevention piece, which I know is so much a part of what you do as well with talking about nutrition, because food is medicine, right? And it starts young. It starts with our children of learning those habits. And so I felt like that was the missing piece for me. I had it when I was young, and then I lost it and I had to go find it again. And I was like, I need to share this with people, because I had such an intimate understanding, because I grew up with Ayurveda and then I had this Western medical training. So I felt like if I don't do it, then who else is going to do it? Not that there aren't other people doing that. There's so many people who are doing this work, but I thought this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. It's almost like phase one of your life was, being a child raised with Eastern medicine. Phase two of your life was, becoming a medical doctor and all, submerging yourself, I'm sure, in the research and the diagnosis and treatment. And now phase three is really integrating both of them together, which is a beautiful thing. You did say that really piqued my interest, that everything you learned about Ayurveda or Eastern medicine, the Western model was proving out in the research. Can you dive into that a little bit? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in Ayurveda, one of the basic tenet of Ayurveda, so it's 5,000 years old, the science, right? It comes from these Vedic texts that were written in South Asia 5,000 years ago. And the basic principle, if I had to really boil it down to sort of one central concept, is that when you live in harmony with nature, you will have optimal health and a vibrant life. Full stop. Okay. The specific thing I'm talking about is this idea of circadian medicine, right? We know that when we sync up with the daily path of the sun, the daily path of light through the sky, right? That's regulating our hormones. And if we can make sure we reset that circadian rhythm on a daily basis, our hormonal release will be regulated. It won't be dysregulated. What I was seeing for myself is that working in the emergency room, working in that very intense environment of medical training, I had no circadian rhythm. I was all over the place. I was working all days, all hours of the day and night. I was eating on the run. I had no rhythm or routine to anything anymore. And I was not in harmony with nature at all. I wasn't in harmony with my life, quite honestly, with my children, with my family. But I saw I experienced it myself, that what happened to me when I was completely out of sync. And I know that all my hormones were out of whack, which then we know every hormone, specifically, we're talking about melatonin and cortisol, right? That are specifically released in response to the brain sensing light, right? On a daily basis. Those then are linked to a cascade of every other hormone in the body, which is then linked to, the control of every cell and every system in our system, in our body, right? And so right there, this idea of living in harmony with the daily path of the sun, it's proven by Western science. We know this to be true. So something that simple is actually quite profound, and it's the basis of health. And so that's what I mean by it was being proven in the science that we were seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. And hormonal regulation is, tied to your mental health, your physical health, your weight. I mean, there's just so many things, your ability to reproduce, so many things, right? So let's talk about Ayurveda, because I remember when I first met you and we started talking about it, it was completely foreign to me. I knew nothing. Now I know a little bit more because I know you and I've read your book, and this is a great resource for really kind of how to integrate Ayurveda into your life right now, right? As an adult, as a family, as a child. So walk us through sort of Ayurveda 101.
Yeah. So again, it's the oldest healing system known. It's 5,000 years old. And really, it's considered the mother of all healing, because all other healing systems have their roots in Ayurveda, including Western medicine and traditional Chinese medicine. They have roots in Ayurveda. You'll see a lot of similarities. You'll see a lot of things. I always say that once you see Ayurveda, you can't unsee it. You will see it everywhere. It's really quite interesting. It's fascinating. Ayurveda is based on this idea that everything in the universe, including human beings, are made of the same 5 elements: space, air, fire, water, and earth. And the idea is that we all have different proportions of those 5 elements within us. So when we have harmony of those elements according to what we were born with, within, we will have good health, but also we have to also be in harmony with the elements that are outside of us, in nature, in animals, in plants, in the times of the day. It's about the energies that are at different times of the day. And so this idea is, it then goes to this idea that Ayurveda is a very qualitative science. It's not quantitative. So that's a huge mind shift right there. We're not looking at lab values and images and, those kinds of numbers, quantitative type of things. Yeah, we're looking at qualities, right? So again, going back to those 5 elements, we can describe these 5 elements, right? Fire, which is what, I told you had a lot of fire in you. That you can describe the element of fire as hot and mobile and sharp and quick, right? That's very innate to all human beings. So in Ayurveda, there are 20 qualities that are in 10 pairs of opposites. And the golden principle in Ayurveda, as I call it, is like increases like and opposites reduce. So the idea here is that when a sign or a symptom shows up for you, okay, let's use anxiety. It's a really simple one to understand. I use this one a lot because people can identify with it really quickly. If I ask you to describe the qualities of anxiety, you would say what? What would you say the qualities of anxiety are? Anything off the top of your head?
I would say, for myself even, because I experience this, I would say racing thoughts, palpitations, worry, worst case scenario. Yep. That's I jump to the worst case scenario.
Right. And so,
those are the first,
but like what qualities? Yeah, those are the words you described. So that has the qualities of air and space. There's mobility. It's quick. They're kind of light. It's all up here in your head. Those are the types of things that you describe. So now if we go back, so it has a lot of air and space elements to the symptom of anxiety. So that symptom shows up for you. Okay. So using this golden principle of like increases like and opposites reduce, what you need to do is not to do more things that have those qualities. Running, eating salads, eating cold drinks and foods, right? Those all have the same qualities. It will increase the anxiety. Instead, it's more important to cultivate the opposite qualities of things that are more earthy, so that things that are more grounding, that have heaviness to them, stability, oiliness, right? You get the idea here. It's the opposite. So what are those things? That shows up in the routines you do, making sure you have a routine that creates stability, making sure that you're eating warm cooked foods that have a little bit of a healthy fat in it, or root vegetables, and using warming spices. As far as movement goes, doing things, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't go for a run because that helps to expend energy, but add something in that's more grounding. Do some, seated or supine poses on the floor, gentle stretching, some yin yoga. That will actually help to counterbalance the qualities of anxiety. That's what Ayurveda is about, right? So when you understand this simple principle, you can apply it on a daily basis. I always say that Ayurveda is a daily practice of course correction. Right? Because this idea that we can be in balance all the time is a myth. It's a complete myth that we have bought into in Western culture. It makes all of us crazy, right? There's no such thing. You're
makes
in
us
balance,
more anxious.
according to Ayurveda, you're in balance at 2 times of life. When you're born and then when you die. The rest of the time, you are going to be going in and out of balance, closer to balance, further away. And we say that when you have signs and symptoms, however subtle or obvious they are, that's telling you something, that you're out of balance, you're out of harmony. Take notice, become aware, and then do something to counterbalance the qualities of that symptom. I just said a whole bunch of stuff really fast, but that's sort of, what Ayurveda is really about. It's this conscious way of living, really, is what it comes down to.
And now a word from our sponsor. Everyone is worried and concerned about children's health. We are still in the midst of a pandemic and there's a lot going on. And I wanted to let you know about a new workshop that I'm offering on January 26th from noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The workshop is called The Wait is Over: How to Promote and Protect Your Child's Health at Any Size. It's for parents and caretakers, professionals, and really anyone interested in the health and well-being of children. I'm covering lots of topics, but most importantly, you're going to learn about the 8 pillars of wellness, or what I believe it takes to set the foundation of health and well-being in every child. So you'll get everything you need to know about the big picture on nourishing and nurturing a healthy child at any size. Even if you struggle with self-doubt and questions about what's helpful and what's not, even if you feel like you've tried everything and you feel stuck with your child's behaviors, especially around food choices and eating habits, but especially if you're looking to avoid harming your child's self-esteem and relationship with food. Because I believe you deserve support, answers, and resources. And most importantly, your child deserves to grow up feeling good about themselves in the world. So I hope to see you there. Again, it's on January 26th from noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the workshop is called The Wait is Over: How to Promote and Protect Your Child's Health at Any Size. For all the details about the Wait is Over workshop, head over to thenourishchild.com. I hope to see you there. I'm just curious for you, how are you practicing this personally on a day-to-day basis? And I know you have children, and do they practice that as well? Or how is that all integrated within the family?
Yeah. So, so my kids are older, like yours. They're
mine.
in college. One's graduated, one is in college. Yeah. But I've been doing this work for so many years, so they've grown up with it. And I, used to get a lot of eye rolls, but it is really interesting because I do think that these principles are so innate in human beings that once they learn the concepts, they do come back to it. And they will tell me often that, when they're away, when they were in college, now they're back in college again and on campus, they use these principles pretty innately and pretty naturally because they've learned it. And it's also inborn, right, in humans. And so they're very conscious, like, they're teenagers or, well, young adults. I shouldn't say they're teenagers. They suffer from, anxiety. How could they not, living the world that we live in? They know this concept. And so they will often apply these concepts and choose things to help counterbalance the qualities of anxiety to help calm them down. And they say that it helps them all the time. I mean, it's not just my kids. And so I think when you're trying to teach other people in your family, first, it always starts with you, right? Is being a model of that behavior. I don't necessarily say anything when the kids were younger. I just kind of did it. And then I'd let them ask me questions if they wanted. Otherwise, they just would do, whatever I cooked, they ate sort of thing. Right. But I think that when they started to understand and ask questions, we would talk about it and they're like, oh, that's why such and such makes me feel better, or makes my tummy feel better, or my head feel better, or whatever. So it was just helping them spark that awareness within them, I think. And so for me, the other part of your question was, what do I do on a daily basis? Honestly, I really just try to be aware. When I wake up in the morning, I ask myself, so how am I feeling? Am I feeling any discomfort anywhere, mentally, emotionally, physically? And if I do, I get really curious and I ask myself, so where's that coming from? And I start to look at all aspects of my life. There's a concept in Ayurveda that digestion is the seat of health. That is actually something we've known for 5,000 years. And we now are proving that in Western science, right? That the gut is the second brain of the body. And digestion is also a metaphor in Ayurveda for your ability to process all of the toxins that are coming in from all sources of your life in your body. How do you process them so you can keep what you need and get rid of the rest? Right. And so I will ask myself, I'm having kind of a headache today, this morning. Why is that happening? And I'll go through my head, of the different aspects of life that are toxin contributors, my diet. So how have I been eating and drinking the past 5 to 7 days? What is my media diet been? Because it's not just what I'm eating physically in food. I'll think about, what have my relationships been like? Have I had some difficult conversations, or am I having some anxiety about some conversation that's coming up? How's my work and my passion, my interests? What's going on there? What's going on in my environment, my physical space that I live, work, and play in? Have I been able to go to places that give me joy, or have I felt really cooped up, right? I know that was a big thing during the pandemic and the early time of quarantine. And then the fifth area is my lifestyle and routines. What am I doing every day? Have I been sleeping well? Have I been eating my meals on time? Have I been working, sitting hunched over in front of a computer? I ask myself these questions. So it's this awareness. I guess that's really what I do on a daily basis. And then I start to troubleshoot and say, oh, okay, I have not, I've had, I've gone out a few times for meals and something is not sitting well with me. Maybe I should just take a step back and just eat some warm, nourishing soups and, teas for the next day to help just kind of balance myself out. That's the kind of thing I'm doing on a daily basis.
Okay. Awesome. I feel like that awareness is so helpful for many of us. I just came off of a trip that took me on the West Coast. And when I came back, the first day I was back, I woke up and I'm like, whoa, do I have a headache? I felt like, just my head was being squeezed. And I'm not somebody, thankfully, who suffers from headaches at all. So when I get one, it really stands out to me. And same thing. It was like, I'm probably dehydrated. I have a little jet lag. I'm going to take it easy today. I took a nap in the afternoon. I mean, it just, again, that awareness of how do I correct this symptom that I'm feeling? And I think some of us do that sort of naturally. We don't think, oh, this is Ayurveda, or, oh, this is, self-awareness or anti-anxiety practices, or, I mean, we just sort of naturally do that. But I also think that there are people out there that don't have that natural barometer, that self-awareness or that connection within. And so a lot of what I feel like you're saying is also just really understanding who you are, understanding your body, understanding all everything that you're feeling internally, right? And thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's even more than understanding it necessarily. I think it's getting curious and taking a moment to ask yourself, well, why is that showing up for me? Right. It kind of goes back to what you were mentioning at the very beginning of our conversation, which is, you had that awareness to say, I shouldn't have to have headaches and stomach aches and pain when I was telling you about my story in my medical training. And I think that there's something within humans, especially in Western culture, that we think we just need to live with these symptoms, right? That there's nothing we can do sometimes, right? And so, and that the answers are outside of us. I agree that we need guides. We need health professionals who have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience that they can share with us. But I do think that there is so much internal wisdom that we turn off when we're young, when we're kids, which is why I so appreciate the work that you do, because so much of what you're doing also is helping children learn to listen to themselves, right? With food, to listen to their inclination, right? And you're helping parents help their kids keep listening to themselves, because, I wrote in my book actually, and I actually thought about you, you're in my credits because you were a big supporter of me saying, just do it, Avanti, you can do it. And I remember writing this, and I was thinking about you and your work is that, as children, we're so taught to work with other kids and work in groups and play nicely and all these things, which is great. And, listen to authority figures in school, in our lives. And that's all important. But what about the wisdom that we have within? Why is it that we start to shut that down when we're children, where we are more worried about listening to everybody else's opinion, working in a group, listening to the authority figures, but then we don't listen to ourselves? Why can't we do both? Right. And I find that what was happening is that so many of the people who come to me for advice and help, my patients, my clients, my students, they've turned off that internal wisdom, that knowing that they have, and they don't know how to access it again, or they can't figure out how they can rekindle that knowing. And I think that if we can take a moment and teach our children to listen to what they feel also inside, what they know, we're going to be in a lot better place, because they're learning both things, right? They're learning to listen to the outside voices, consider those, and then listen to what their internal voice is, and then make a decision based on both the information.
Yeah. I think that parents, and I would love your feedback on this and some of your advice for parents listening, the whole intuitiveness of eating. Babies are born intuitive eaters. They know how much formula or breast milk to take, and they know when to stop. They're very in tune to their appetite, but they lose that tuning in over time. And it typically starts when we start solid foods, when that external person is feeding that little baby. But I'm curious as to your thoughts on sort of helping children, because one of the challenges is that children don't speak. And so they really rely on their parents at an early age to help them interpret to the outside world how they're feeling. And so, through an Ayurvedic lens, how can parents really help their children be present and attached to all those internal thoughts, feelings, messages that start from day one?
So I think it's a good point that you make, that, children, when they're young, they can't verbalize, right? So you can't necessarily have a conversation with them about how they're feeling, or are they full, or are they not? I do think that part of this is the awareness of a parent of really observing their kid and not having judgment on how much they're eating, what they're eating, trying to guide them, but then also allowing a little bit of the natural instinct to come into play, right? In our culture here, there's so much about good and bad all the time. Everything is good or bad. And I don't think that that's actually true. In Ayurveda, there is no good or bad. It's just what is health supporting and what's health weakening. A piece of cake is not a bad thing, right? Some candy is not a bad thing. It's just that when it becomes the only thing, that's where it becomes health weakening rather than health supporting. And I think that what happens, is that so much of us, our instincts as parents gets influenced by what we think is right and wrong, what's good and bad. I remember one of an attending that I was very fond of in my training when I was in medical school, actually, and it still stays with me. So that was 20 something years ago. Dr. Meadows. And I remember I was on a rotation, and he said to us medical students, we were talking about, the differences of taking care of children, because you have parents in the room also trying to give you this information when you're doing a history and physical. And what he said to us has always stuck with me as a parent also, because I was a young parent, right? Is always listen to what the parents are saying, because they have so much information that you can't get from a child, right? And really trust their instincts. If you know it's their instincts and it's not coming from outside sources. So really listen carefully and look at them and watch their interactions and watch their facial expressions. It's something that struck me so much and has stuck with me. And I used it again in my own parenting with my kids, because I was in medical school when I had my children. I had no freaking clue what I was doing in any area of my life, I felt like. And I would always go back to that, you have natural instincts, Avanti, to be a parent. Trust those instincts. You may not know exactly, what activities to put them in, or, should they be listening to this music or that music, but I had instincts about what they liked and what they didn't by watching them and observing them. So I allowed myself to trust myself. So it's a very long answer to your question, but I think my biggest advice to parents is allow yourself to trust yourself and just really be aware, watch your kids, look at their preferences and don't make judgments on them.
Yeah. And accept them, because they're not going to always be the same from one child to the next. And, trust yourself and trust your child, I think too, right? If we want our kids to understand themselves, we have to trust that they know themselves, right?
Right. Exactly. And so, I remember my younger child, Isha, who's now in college. She would probably be like, Mom, you're talking about me on the podcast. I'm 19. But, she loved macaroni and cheese. I don't know why. She just loved it for whatever reason. And there were times where I was and there was probably a year of her childhood when that's all she would eat. But she would also eat lots of fruits and vegetables and things like that. But that was the only other solid food that she wanted to eat. And I would get so much flack about it from other people. That's all she eats. That's all she eats. That's all she eats. And I was and I got really stressed out about it. But for whatever reason, that's what she wanted to eat. Does she only eat macaroni and cheese now in college? No, she doesn't. Okay. So like, you know what I mean? I was
Right.
like, I think it was there were times when I remember I'd be like, oh my God, she's going to be an adult and that's all she's ever going to eat. She's going to have like a cabinet full of macaroni and cheese and she'll never eat anything else. You know, I was like making judgments on just something that she happened to like, you know, for whatever reason. Right. And I think I just trusted myself of like, okay, that's what she likes, but you know, she's eating other things too. It's okay. She'll be okay. She's not going to turn into macaroni and cheese, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. And it's a long game, right? Oh, there's so much that goes into feeding kids. And, yeah. And I guess one of the last questions I have for you is around this, you know, whole idea that people, this is coming from a nutrition angle or a dietary angle, that people have a propensity for a certain preference or related to their, what would you call it? Like you called me fire. So, and I remember us talking about the fact that I like a lot of spicy food and hot food. And so talk to us about that connection between sort of your, what do you call it? Your Ayurvedic personality or preferences or?
Yeah. Well, so in Sanskrit, that's called the dosha, which is a bioenergy. I tend to not use Sanskrit words, because I think that becomes just a barrier to understanding and to really diving into Ayurveda more. I like to think about it more as a bioenergetic composition. And it's really what elements dominate in you, right? And so when I was talking to you about that is that, you know, you have a lot of dominant fire, a lot of a large proportion of fire within your natural constitution. So what can happen sometimes is that we tend to go towards things that have the same qualities that predominate within us. So if we have a lot of fire, we like fiery things, whether it's the kinds of foods that have fire qualities or the types of activities or the way that we are in the world, like, you know, always on the go. I know this about you. You do lots of stuff, you know, which I find so inspiring. But what can happen. And so again, there's no good or bad to that. It's just that when it gets out of balance with you, when you start to notice that you're having symptoms that have those qualities, then you know, I need to dial it back because I am just increasing that. It's that like increases like. I have a lot of fire within me. I'm eating lots of fiery foods. I have lots of fiery activities. I have, you know, I'm on the go all the time. And this is just increasing that fire within me. It's showing up now as acid reflux, let's say, okay, or rashes, or headaches, you know, things like that are common symptoms of a lot of fire. I need to think about, again, that awareness of what have I been doing lately? What have I been eating? What kinds of activities have I been engaged in? What's my routine been like? Oh, I've been working 24 hours a day, whatever it is, right? How am I going to increase or cultivate the opposite qualities? So I think that when it comes to these food preferences, it's the same thing. Again, there's nothing wrong with liking a certain food. For my daughter, Isha, she loved macaroni and cheese. Okay, what are the qualities of that? That has a lot of earth in it. You know, it's got that heaviness, a lot of sweet, a lot of earthy qualities. Okay, and did it cause any specific symptoms in her? No. So, okay, it's her preference. You know what I mean? Right. So I think, again, it's that balance. Fire, go ahead.
I was just there's fire. There's, what are the other sort of biochemical compositions?
Yeah. So the 5 elements are space, air, fire, water, and earth. And really, it comes down to space and air combined to make one element called, combined to make the dosha of vata, which I always refer to as air because it's easier to understand. Okay. Space is a little esoteric. The second one is when fire and water are combined, and that makes pitta. So again, I tend to call that fire because it's easier to understand. And then the last is earth and water, which is kapha, and that is the earth quality. So the 3 that I kind of, it's easier to understand is that you either have a lot of air element, a lot of fire element, or a lot of earth element, and those qualities.
Okay.
And so then based on what's showing up for you, you can make decisions about what kinds of foods you need to be eating, what kinds of activities you should be engaging in, what kind of routines you need to have in place. That becomes clearer when you do that. So it's the same thing with children. And really, quite honestly, unless you're having a symptom of some kind, you're probably doing just fine, right? That's the point, is that it's only when we have some kind of challenge that we're like, well, how do I get rid of that? That's when you start to become aware and start thinking about these things.
Yeah. And so I'm sure parents are out there listening thinking, oh, my child has eczema, lots of rashes, or my child tends to be constipated. And we know from the Western medical model, low fiber, or food sensitivities for the eczema or environmental sensitivities. How do we blend that or dovetail that with Eastern medicine? Or do we at all?
What you can start. No, you can, absolutely. And I think that what you start to do is you look at that symptom and you say, what are the qualities of the symptom? Which elements does it line up with? And then you start to think about like increases like and opposites reduce, right? And so then how do I cultivate those opposite qualities with the food choices that we're making, the routines, the types of movement, all of those things come into play because you can cultivate the opposite qualities, right? Depending on what the symptom is. So it just goes back to exactly the same thing that adults do, right? You look at the symptom that's showing up and consider the qualities and then cultivate the opposite qualities to start to bring it back into balance.
Gotcha. Awesome. Avanti, you're such a wise wealth of knowledge. I appreciate having you on the show so much. This is your book, The Health Catalyst. Tell people where they can learn more about you and where they can find this book.
Oh, absolutely. It's thank you. You can find me on my website, which is my full name, avantikumarsingh.com. I'm on Instagram, same handle, my full name. And you can find my book, The Health Catalyst, on Amazon, on most booksellers. And then my podcast, The Healing Catalyst podcast, is on all the platforms for that too. So yeah. You can find me in all those places.
Well, I love how you're bringing Ayurveda more mainstream and really getting the message out there for people who might not have ever heard it or might be curious about it and be interested in implementing it more into their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to bring this knowledge to as many people as I can. So thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast so that I can share it with your whole community. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's great to have you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime.
Thanks for listening to the Nourish Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.